Thank you, Andrew. So a couple days ago, you introduced Gideon, the choreographer and dancer from Australia, and said that he had come the furthest to be a speaker at PopTech. But I feel like, at least culturally, I'm coming from a place much further away. I'm here from the federal government. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to get drug tested on Monday because I didn't stand at the lectern and I'm not wearing a suit. So I'm really excited to be here. I don't know about you, but I think that our policymakers could use a really good dose of the kinds of conversations that are taking place and the kinds of presentations we've all been able to view here. I really think, boy, if we could get more people from Washington who are making policies that affect us all to be able to hear some of the kinds of things that are happening here, I think that would be really good for our country. And so look, I'm here not to announce a breakthrough innovation or to take a bow for any of the things that we've done over the last 8 months, but to share chapter 1, page 1 of the story of how I and other colleagues from the Obama administration are ourselves reimagining America, and specifically how we're reimagining America in terms of its relationship and its role in the wider world. I don't know about you, but I think it was tough to be an American the last 5 or 6 years of the Bush administration and travel abroad. I mean, did you all feel like you were punished for being Americans a lot of the time when you were abroad? And, you know, I know people, they pretended to be Canadians, they pretended to be Finnish, but it's the first time in American history where I feel like when you left our shores, people felt compelled to apologize for something. And that's a bad thing. That is a malignant thing. And so what's clear is that it's now time for a reboot. It's time to reimagine the way in which we engage in the wider world and the way in which we're experimenting, the way in which we're innovating and thinking about how to do this is this frame that we call 21st century statecraft. And I think it's made possible by two things. Number one, the election of Barack Obama, and number two, the lessons from a tin toy maker in Togo. And the story essentially is this. I have a really good friend who travels to Togo all the time. And every time she goes to the same village in the same street corner and buys one of these little tin toys from the same young man that's always there. And she's been doing this for years, and the last time she went back, she said the young man said to her, "Madam, every time you come to my village, you come to see me and you buy whatever I have a sample of here. In the future, why don't you just email me and commission a piece? And if you have a smartphone like me, you can just take a picture, upload the file, email it to me, and you can commission something." And so the breakthrough innovation here is connectedness. If the toy-making teen in Togo making tin toys is connected, then there's something there, and there's a way for us to engage in the wider world that I think is interesting and special. And where we're pursuing this is thinking about how can we do this by empowering versus overpowering. If you think about Paul Van Zil's presentation yesterday and talking about torture, just the image of waterboarding, overpowering. If you think about the last 8 years of American foreign policy, overpowering. But if you think about the last 3 days of PopTech, empowering. And so how can we migrate America's foreign policy from being less about overpowering and more about empowering? One thing we've got to bear in mind, though, is it's all about power in Washington. Power in Washington is like money in New York is like fame in Los Angeles. And the connection between power and information is long-standing. How did the Catholic Church maintain not just spiritual hegemony, but also intellectual and political hegemony for centuries? They controlled the texts. They controlled information. And we've all heard about the printing press already. It wasn't until the printing press, and it wasn't until the miniaturization of the printing press, exactly as Nick described, that power then devolved to individuals. and we had the Protestant Reformation, we had a variety of things, all of which happened on the back of individuals having access to information. And after the Catholic Church lost its political hegemony, a series of little nation-states formed. And what then happened was the formation of what we consider modern-day diplomacy. And I would argue that modern-day diplomacy is largely unchanged, including in our own country from its first days when Ben Franklin was our ambassador to France to present day. Diplomacy has largely been done government to government, white guys with white shirts and red ties talking to other white guys with white shirts and red ties, with flags in the background determining the relationships between our government. And the innovation that we said we wanted to bring at the beginning of the Obama administration was to go beyond just engaging government to government, but thinking about how we can connect with people directly. And so our earliest experiment was this thing called the no ruse message. So we haven't had diplomatic relationships with Iran since the hostage crisis in the 1970s. But we said, you know what? Given the dynamic of what Michael described, there's nothing to keep us from going into the Oval Office, popping open a camera, the president addressing Iranians and Farsi-speaking people directly, and then we'll dub it and subtitle it. And so for the first time in decades, we connected with the Iranian people. And this became hugely viral in Iran. And who knows? I don't know, but maybe it had some impact on the election. I don't know. This is all made possible by technology. This is all made possible by a toolbox that exists today that didn't exist 10 years ago. Make no mistake, if Paul Revere were alive today, he wouldn't have had to make a midnight ride. He would have just tweeted. And the lantern hangers would have been retweeters. And so, you know, I think that all of this ability for us to connect and engage is great. And you know, we then built on the experience of the no ruse message with the president's speech in Cairo, where he didn't just speak to the government, he didn't just speak to a room full of Egyptian university students, and he didn't just speak to the government of Egypt, but based on the power of our networks, based on the connectedness, he was able to connect with that young Muslim youth who's a toy maker in Togo. He was able to connect with Muslims all over the world. And so, you know, our question now at the State Department is how can we use this connectedness again to empower rather than overpower? And I just got back. This is in Goma. This is in East Congo. And the Congo, especially East Congo, is truly one of the toughest places on the planet. It has a per capita GDP of $184. The level of sexual violence against women and children in the East Congo is unlike anything in recorded history. It's remarkable. It's truly deprived. But one of the weird things is when I got off a UN plane and in Goma, my BlackBerry lit up with a choice of 3 different 3G wireless networks. There are more third-generation wireless networks in East Congo than there are in Camden, Maine. And so you can see the picture of these cell phone kiosks, and there are hundreds of these kiosks. There are 2 sectors of the economy that are thriving in East Congo. One is beer. You can get a Primus lager anywhere. And the other is mobile telephony. So again, how can we use the breakthrough innovation of wide-scale access to mobile telephony to empower rather than overpower? Well, I'd like to suggest, first of all, that we think about some of these PopTech fellows and think about some of the really cool innovations that have been suggested here over the last couple days. And it occurs to me, and I know it would occur to others, that, hey, this would be a great instrument in our foreign policy. Wouldn't it be great if we could use some of these entrepreneurs, PopTech fellows, but also entrepreneurs from all over the world who are doing great things with mobile telephony, and instead of just increasing the number of peacekeepers we have in the East Congo, what if we build programs that are rooted in creating economic self-sufficiency. You may recognize this image. This is from the cover of The Economist a couple weeks ago. There's a sensational innovation taking place right now called mobile banking. And this is not an American innovation. This is something that actually principally has its roots in Kenya. And so a different approach we're taking right now in terms of empowering versus overpowering is when we go into places like Afghanistan, when we go into places like the Congo, one of the things that we're trying to do are scale programs like mobile banking. So just as an example, when I got off the plane in East Congo and I spent time there and I rode around with cops drinking banana wine and I went into demobilization camps to meet with ex-combatants, you know, one of the things that I learned was there's absolutely zero zilch mainstream financial services. And the best thing that the American people could do and that the American government could do was to help bring access to mobile banking there, because nobody's going to build the bricks and mortar for traditional bank branches. And this is a new and this is a totally different kind of statecraft. This is truly 21st century statecraft. And then the other thing we learned while we were there was that a lot of the sexual violence that was taking place against women was taking place because of a lack of situational awareness. So the way it works is there are huge numbers of principally women and children concentrated in refugee camps. And a lot of the time, a lot of the acts of sexual violence take place when the women leave the camp to go get food, to go get firewood, things like this. And in the midst of this, one of the things that I learned was that the peacekeepers, the UN peacekeepers, actually did a pretty good job of keeping track of bad guys. So they would know that, hey, there are 150 drunk high bad guys a mile past that ridge. But what they weren't doing was they weren't taking advantage of the connectedness that we all now have. They were keeping the information, they were using it for their own purposes, but they weren't sharing that information with refugee camp administrators, NGOs, hospitals, dispensaries, people themselves who have cell phones who could take advantage of that information. And so a program we're putting in place right now is saying to the peacekeepers, hey, we know information in a military setting is something that you typically hold on to and that you don't give up. But if all you do is take the information that you already have about where the drunk high bad guys are, and you put it into a text message, you put it into a listserv email, you blast it out, then as women leave these camps, they'll know, hey, don't go north, go south. It's very simple. A lot of what we've been hearing over the last couple of days about these breakthrough innovations, breaking complete new ground, technologically, scientifically, and a lot of the way in which we're breaking new ground diplomatically is by taking things that already exist, but applying them in what I think are pretty obvious, pretty straightforward ways to fix problems that on their surface don't have anything to do with technology or telecommunications. Another example of some of what we're doing, I was just in Mexico last week, and there was a big problem there where with drug-related violence, and nobody will inform on drug activity, on gang activity there, because if all the informants end up getting shot in the head. And so everybody's sort of at a loss. We don't know what to do, and so they're just like, take crazy Alec, send him to Mexico, tell him to take some of his crazy innovator friends with him and see what you come up with. And again, this is something, what we came up with is something very straightforward. You know, we met with the government, with NGOs, with Carlos Slim, and what we did is we came up with a little system through which people are going to be able to email or text message gang activity that's going to go to sort of a central cache area, to a website. It's going to be scrubbed so that it's all anonymized at that point, so people cannot be tagged. It then goes up to an outward-facing website, so everybody can see where there's reported crime, gang activity, drug activity, and then the government has agreed that whenever these reports take place, they will respond super fast, and then they themselves will post back on the site what happened. And so this is again just chapter 1, page 1 of where we are in thinking about how we can use innovation, how we can use technology in our statecraft. And I just want to leave you all with an invitation, which is an invitation to connect and engage with us as we write the second page of this. I'm new to government. You know, I come from the NGO sector. I ran tech, media, and telecom policy for Barack Obama's presidential campaign. And so I feel sort of amidst my tribe here, more so than sort of in the cubicles of Washington, D.C. And so one of my hopes coming out of this conference is that the kinds of thinking and the kinds of thinkers that are in places like this can find a home in Washington policymaking. And so I just want to leave you with the invitation to think long and hard about how innovation can be applied in America's foreign policy in ways that aren't taking place, and know that there's a lot of open-mindedness for how we do it in the next 3 and hopefully 7 years. Yeah. Thank you all.